Hello everybody, Alyne Hart here. So today's video is one that I'm really excited about. So I have had this idea milling around in my head called interview with and then insert the topic. So, editors, cover models, cover designers, anybody in the industry, I kind of want to have them on and pick their brain a little bit. So today I'm starting with interview with an editor. And I'm so excited about the person that I'm collabing with because we've been friends on social media for a little over a year. She's someone that I really value her opinion. I look up to her. I just think she's an incredible person. So the person that I'm interviewing today is Terri A. Wilson, and she has a blog that I'm going to go ahead and link down below. And I would encourage you to get with her and talk to her and find out what she's all about because I'm telling you, she's a great person to know, and I kind of absolutely adore her. So the reason I'm really excited about doing this topic today is for quite a few reasons. And I think first of all, because the first time I ever went about contacting an editor, I was literally terrified. I had no idea what to look for, what to ask, anything like that. And also, I'm in a lot of author groups on Facebook. And I think that one of the things that I see posted most of the time from newer authors is questions about editors. And I really wanted to kind of demystify that process and, what kind of questions we should be asking, what the services actually mean, because, there's three, or actually there's more services of editing. And so what do they all mean? Like, how are they different? What should I be paying for? What should I be asking an editor? And then I also posed the question in my private author group, if you could ask an editor a question, what would you ask? And I've got a list of questions for Terri, so I hope she isn't too scared about that. I met Terri last year on Twitter, of all places. I was looking for an editor for Rocking Autumn. And to me, even though my debut novel really was The Island, and I love that story and I love those characters, I am thinking really hard about pulling it off the shelves, completely revamping it and reworking it and kind of relaunching it into something that I'm really, really proud of. I'm really proud that I wrote the book, but I'm not 100% proud of the writing. I didn't have an editor. Anyway, I digress. So to me, my debut novel really was Rocking Autumn because it was the first time I sat down with an outline and I had studied the craft of writing and I sat down to actually write a novel, which isn't what happened when I sat down to write The Island. I had saved up money for an editor and I went about the process of looking for an editor, having no clue what I was looking for, and I queried a few of them. And I think that my actual words were, I'm looking to procure an editor. And I think because I was trying to sound really worldly and sophisticated or something. I met Terri and I was going to have her edit my book. And then I ended up getting into this horrible accident at work. I tore my hamstring in 2 places. I was bedbound for about 2 months. I missed a lot of work, and all that money that I had saved up for those editing services ended up having to pay my bills. Terri and I stayed in contact and we ended up becoming friends. And I'm really glad that I got to know her and that I met her because I think that she is an incredible person. And we chat through DMs and on Facebook, and we have encouraged each other and lifted each other up as indies should do. She's one of my favorite people that I've met through this journey. And so without further ado, let's get on to interview with an editor. So hi, we are here today with my friend Terri Wilson, and we're gonna try and demystify editing a little bit. So Terri, did you bring something to drink today?
I did. It's afternoon here, so I don't have any coffee, but I got some coconut water.
So I have a mug, but I have mineral water. I'm cheating a little bit. So okay, so I have a list of questions that I have, just some like general overview questions about editing, and then I have a big list of questions from authors about editors. So I hope you are ready for that.
Okay, good thing I went to the bathroom first.
Yeah. So first, why should we get a professional edit when we have things like Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid and maybe a best friend who's an English teacher? Why should we pay the money to get a professional edit?
Well, honestly, that's a really good question, and I don't know that I've got the perfect answer for that. So
I
here's what
don't
I'm
need a perfect answer.
okay. So here's what I'm gonna say. One thing is you have to be careful when you have your friends reading something because they're your friends.
Yeah,
They're the people you see all the time, and they may not be able to be objective as to, you know, they've been listening to you talk and listening to you stress out. And so the last thing they want to do is stress you out more. So they're going to say, oh, Alyne, this is so great. Pulitzer Prize winner book story, right?
oh, for sure, for sure.
um, I think it's really good in the beginning, probably the first, I would say maybe 2 or 3 books to get a good professional editor because number one of the distance that
Hmm.
they have, and number two, somebody who's an English major or just because they know grammar doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good editor. A good editor has to be able to take apart everything, put it back together, and see how it all flows, see what's wrong, make suggestions.
Hmm.
But also, you don't want somebody who's going to become possessive of your work either.
Sure, that totally makes sense.
So, here's the thing. It's like I use Pro Writing Aid in addition to editors and
Right,
proofreaders.
and I love Pro Writing Aid.
I do too. And so if you don't have a big budget, then definitely stick with the Pro Writing Aid and stick with Grammarly.
Hmm.
And then the latest thing that I've been doing with my work and with other people's work is I figured out how to get the computer to read it to me
I love that.
so that I can hear it. Because like with Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid, if you meant to say she, but you
Hmm.
wrote he, it won't pick that up
Right.
and it won't make the corrections. And when you're reading it to yourself quietly, you won't hear it. And
No.
sometimes I find that even if I read it out loud, I don't hear things. But if somebody else is reading it out loud to me, like
Yes.
the computer's going to read exactly what's there.
Read aloud has probably been my favorite thing. I did it with The Space Between Us, and I was like, holy cow, you just find so much stuff. It's crazy.
And I think, I mean, it's a struggle. It really is because editing is not cheap.
No.
Not. And I'm not even one of the more expensive people. And I get, all the time, well, thank you, but I can't. And I get it. So I think you kind of have to just decide what works for you.
Hmm.
Of course, there's the business part of me that's like, oh yeah, you need to hire me right now because you need an editor. But but I mean, I totally get it. And I think that it's just it's just one of those things you have to decide what works for you. If you think you have a really like an awesome system and you've put a book out there and the reviews are you don't get reviews that say, "Oh, there was too many mistakes, it was too distracting," then maybe you don't have to do a professional editor.
Hmm.
But I think if you are somebody who's not confident in like uh, the big thing I see when I read people's work is they will switch verb tenses,
Oh, for sure. I had a huge problem with that.
and they'll use passive voice when they could be using active. And then
Hmm.
the other thing is too is a big like point of view switch. I mean, especially if you're doing a dual point of view,
Yeah.
you're in the female like what was it? Rocking Autumn was Jax and Autumn, right?
Right.
Okay. Sorry, I've read a ton of books since then, but
It's
okay.
okay.
So if I'm in Autumn's head for her chapter, Autumn doesn't know that Jax is hungry unless he says, "Hey, I'm hungry."
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just things like that. I don't know that I've got the perfect answer for that. to
And
be
there
honest.
probably is no perfect answer, but I think that was great. Okay, so one of the next questions that I see a lot, and I think the reason I really want to do this is because to indie authors and even other authors, it just editing and the different kinds of services are it's mystifying. Like, what is a line edit, a copy edit, a developmental edit? Like, what are they all, and how do you know kind of which one that you want to choose, if that makes sense?
Um, Honestly, even between editors, we don't necessarily have the best definition, and we argue about what each thing means. A proofreader would be somebody who only looks at spelling, grammar, um, maybe that you used the right word choice, but they're not going to make any corrections as far as the storyline goes.
Okay.
A line editor is somebody who will look at word choice, and they'll look at the flow of the story.
Okay.
So, for instance, if I had a blonde in chapter 3, and by chapter 5 she's a brunette, and I didn't talk anywhere about she changed hair color.
Right.
Okay, so that's gonna be like a line editor, a content editor more for that too.
Okay.
Now, most editors though, line editors, and they look at content too. I can't read a book without doing both.
Yeah, I wouldn't see how you could separate that. It would be really hard.
Yeah, so I only charge one fee. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
go for this or that. I only charge one fee because if I see something, like I did a story for somebody who, it was like a turn of the century type setting, and the women weren't acting, they were doing things that they wouldn't normally do during that time period. And so I had to tell her, I had to say, look, this doesn't work. You have your characters doing something that is totally out of sync of that time period, and she didn't even think about that.
Oh.
Then a developmental editor is, if you can afford a developmental editor, and especially if you're struggling with, you've had some reviews that have come back and they said, the story doesn't flow, I don't believe the characters, there's no connection, the dialogue sucks, all that stuff. A developmental editor is somebody who will help take your ideas and put it together in like almost like a flow chart kind of way, so you can just go and write the story out.
Okay.
Developmental editors, good ones, are absolutely 100% worth their weight in gold.
So
Because
I would think if you're really new, that might be the way to go, so that you can learn story structure. Or
if you can, and if you haven't spent the time learning your craft before you start to write, if you
okay.
just you go see Mamma Mia and you have this great idea for a story, oh my god, I'm going to write this story, now what?
Okay.
So if you don't want to do some of the legwork of reading about plot and reading about character development and learning some of that stuff on your own, it's like having a private tutor who will come in and help
See, and
you.
I have all along been wrong about what that is, so I'm actually really glad that I asked that question.
Well, in all honesty, if you interviewed another editor next week,
Yeah.
they may say some different things. I mean, it's kind of nebulous.
And that's, and I think when you go to different editors, their services, some of them, the descriptions of what they're offering, it sounds so much the same or different from another editor's, and that's why it can be really confusing.
Yeah, and I think you that's where you have to talk to the editor and
Okay.
find out, this is what I want. This is exactly what I want. I need help with my dialogue. If I need help with my dialogue, I'm definitely not going to go to a proofreader or a line editor unless I've had a relationship with them where I can get them to look a little bit deeper. If I'm having trouble creating dialogue that's believable, then I'm going to want to go to like a developmental editor. Some people may call that a content editor. If I'm having trouble with typos, You know, people say I have a lot of typos. It's a great story, but just the typos were too distracting. Well, then you might just want to go to a proofreader.
Okay.
Who can do that last look at everything, that last polish to make sure that that's what you have going on.
Okay.
And, you know, if you're looking at people's websites, you have to understand, you know, we're trying to separate ourselves from everybody else.
Oh, for sure.
So we may word it in some fancy way that makes us sound like, whoa, we're like, da, 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 you know, but if you don't understand it, just email them and say, hey, I don't get what you do.
It's funny that you said that, because in my intro, I was talking about, so when I emailed you, I can still remember I said, I'm looking to procure an editor, because I thought, I thought it made me sound like just so smart and bougie. I don't even know. Okay, so my final question, then we'll get on to the questions. And there's actually some really good ones.
Okay.
Let's see. I want to know, so if I'm a brand new author and I've never worked with an editor and I'm emailing editors, what are the kind of questions that I should be asking to find out if you and I can work together?
I would first of all look at their website.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to gravitate more to editors who have blogs or who are book reviewers as well, because their content on their website is updated more often.
Okay.
I prefer a single editor over like a company. There are companies out there who will subcontract with editors.
Right, like Kirkus and things like that.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't like having that middleman. So I would look to see if there's a middle person in there. I shouldn't be sexist and say middleman, but I mean, I want to be able to talk to the person face to face, or not face to face, but through email. When you contact them, so those are things you look at. When you contact them, ask them what their turnaround time is,
Mm-hmm.
what their availability is. Good proofreaders, good editors, they may be booked
Right.
well in advance. Like one of the people I'm using right now, I scheduled her like 6 weeks ago, but it worked out well for me because then it gave me a drop dead deadline.
Yes.
That's a little repetitively redundant. So I had to get it to her by then. So you ask their time schedule, ask their turnaround time, ask them what they've done before.
Mm-hmm.
If you get somebody who's only done nonfiction and you throw in a fantasy, they may not be able to do it.
Right. Now, what about genres? Should we be asking, are they familiar with our genre, or is that important or not?
Well, definitely ask them if they're okay with graphic sex scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Explicit sex scenes. Some editors don't like to read that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a sex scene that is steamy and hot, let your editor know that up front. If you have anything that you think may be a trigger, then I would let them know that up front too. So that way they're not halfway through the story and they're like, oh my gosh, this isn't working.
Okay.
As far as a genre goes, I think for your basic editing, I think as long as they're familiar with fiction, we're good. I mean, I wouldn't want I might not go with a developmental author who was only doing romance if I'm trying to do high fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Because the tropes are different.
Sure. And there's different expectations, I think, within different genres. And yeah.
But I think as far as an editor or a proofreader, just a basic editor, basic proofreader, I don't think it really matters per genre. So.
Okay. All right. So this is the list of questions.
Okay.
These are the burning questions.
You owe me. Just remember that.
I do owe you. When we go to South Carolina, I will buy you the first drink. Okay. No, actually, they're really easy and it's nothing scary. I think that, and actually you answered a few of them, so I might even skip them. Okay. So one person asked, do you suggest a proofreader as well as an editor?
Most editors, the ones that are good, will offer 2 reads.
Okay.
So they will make suggestions. I think you should, and that's one thing I want to point out real quick. I don't know if this is on question or not. there's been a lot of discussion on Facebook lately about editors who are taking advantage of writers. And it really just pisses me off to no end degree. You don't want, it's hard to vet editors. So when you ask people around, make sure you get an editor who's working, who's not trying to write your book. Does that make sense?
Yo, for sure.
It's an editor who will understand that these are just my suggestions. Okay. So make sure that I would talk about that. Like, you know, what do you see your role as? So I just had to add that in. Okay. And now I totally forgot the question. Oh, proofreader and editor. Okay. Sorry. It is so weird being on this side of the camera.
I know. And it's weird me being on this side of the camera.
Okay. So, if you have an editor who only does one read through and makes a ton of suggestions that you need to go back and change, a proofreader would be somebody who would just give that final coat, like that top coat of nail polish, that to make sure that you did everything that you were supposed to do. Honestly, with the way that I see the market right now, I don't know that I would do both. Because
I kind of think that having a bunch of betas after an editor would probably catch any leftovers. Or yes. I have really good beta readers, so maybe mine would, but.
Yes. And then I think also just one more time, read it out loud.
Okay.
One more time, just, you know, one more time, just read it out loud. And I don't think there's any magic number of read-throughs. You know, I can't say if you read it 5 times, it'll be perfect. If you read it 10 times, it'll be perfect. You may be able to go through it, an editor and everything else, and then 2-3 times, it's great. It's ready to go. You may have to do it 10 times, and you're still going to miss. And I don't care what people say, there's probably always going to be that you missed a period. Should have been a question mark.
Yeah.
Or something.
I let myself do one final read through now because I get obsessive about my read throughs and I find stuff every time. So I'm like, okay, one read through and then just stop obsessing because, you know, there's always going to be like a weird apostrophe or just, yeah, there's always something small. So you kind of answered the next question. That was, should an author pay for a second pass after doing suggested edits? So I think you kind of answered that.
Try to find an editor who will do 2 read-throughs.
They're
out there.
Yeah.
You know how to do it.
Okay.
Especially if you have a lot of plot suggestions and things like that. So.
Okay. So the next question is, what do you consider to be your biggest obstacle when you are editing someone else's work?
Well, I'm a reader. And at my heart, I will always be a reader. So sometimes I will get caught up in the story and I'll forget to edit.
Yeah.
And then I have to go back. For me, as an editor, the most stressful time though is the bargaining time. Which never be afraid to bargain with your editor. I have a person who I gave her a quote and she said, "Well, I've got like 4 books on this series. If I give you all 4 books, will you discount it?" And I was like, yeah, that works for me. I mean, guaranteed 4 books. I'm okay with that. So the bargaining time is always the most stressful part for me.
Yeah, I would think so.
But so the other thing is too, is I don't ever want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't like it when people, you know, when I say, so I have to always be careful. Like I can't come out and say, you know, this sucks, give it up. I can't do that. And so I have to just figure out you have to find those good things and the things that need improvement.
Okay. So. All right. So when we are looking for an editor, should an author look for any type of training or credentials?
There are some people in the editing world that say you should be certified. And they believe that sets them apart.
Okay.
And so it's a marketing ploy is what it boils down to. And I'm sure that their training was good. Okay,
Mhm.
I don't want to say anything about it, but I don't think you need to have an editor that has any kind of special training.
Okay.
Um, I I have a pretty good professional background in what I'm doing, but I mean, there's always room for improvement, and I don't. So I don't think you need to. I think, and this is probably going to get me like kicked out of the editing association of the year, but I think somebody with a high school degree can be just as good as somebody with a doctorate professional degree.
It's interesting that you say that because I actually just watched a YouTube video, and it was like the chief editor or editor in chief or whatever it's called with Harper Avery. I think, and she actually pretty much said the same thing, that she doesn't really even ask questions about, were you an English major? She asks, are you a reader? What's the first book you ever read? What's the last book you read? And then have them break it down, because she was more impressed with readers being able to capture stories rather than having certain things on a resume. So I think you actually are probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I'm proud of my accomplishments, okay? But I don't think that those accomplishments necessarily make me a better editor than
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has different accomplishments.
Right.
So,
I agree. Okay, we're close to the end, I promise. um, would an editor, and so apparently we're going to ask globally here, would you, as an editor, would you ever turn down a client based on their reputation in the industry?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't been faced with that yet.
Yeah. And I don't think there's too many. Yeah.
I mean, to be very honest with you, and this again might get me kicked out of, the locker room or something, but I mean, if I need the money, a story's a story.
You
You know
know
what I mean?
what? Exactly.
And even if I don't need the money, I mean, I
You're
think
a business person. It's their reputation. Yeah.
that's what it comes down to. This is my business.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did have to send one back. I did because I just felt that his portrayal of women it was so misogynistic and so over the top. And it
Ooh.
wasn't, I don't feel like it was a character thing. Like it wasn't like his character was like that. So he was in that position.
Mm-hmm.
Just, and I refunded his money and I said, I'm sorry. I can't, because every time I sit down to read your story, it pisses me off and I just can't. So I don't know how professional that was. I guess it's kind of like that no shoes, no shirt, no service thing, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, but I think, and I, I don't know. That's a tough one. Go to the next one.
No, that you actually touched on this same person's next question, and it was, what happens if you get a manuscript that something is triggering or has like a hard pass for you, like maybe a graphic rape or, like you said, misogyny, and what would you do? And I think you just kind of said, I mean, if you don't agree with something, I wouldn't think how you could edit that. I wouldn't be able to.
Well, I think it all depends on how it's portrayed. And that is one thing I probably should add after what I just said. There are books out there that touch on really tough, tough, tough topics. Okay. Like I think, let's go with the classic, The Color Purple.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a chance to edit The Color Purple when it had first come out, I would not have turned that book down. I wouldn't. Um, and it's, it is graphic. It does touch on a lot of things that are tough.
But it does it in the right way. It's not for
Yeah,
schlock. Yeah.
and it's hard to know what that right way is. In the case of the book that I mentioned, I just really feel, and it was just our whole correspondence back and forth with each other, and it just wasn't a good vibe.
Okay.
Like we're connecting. But I think I read a great book that one of the characters was a survivor from the sex slave world.
Ooh.
And she had some flashbacks, and they were hard to read, but I just felt like the author did. It wasn't that she was using that, number one, to sell books. Like, hey,
Hmm.
this is, I'm going to sell books by having this explicit scene in it. But it just, I just think she did a really good job with the whole thing. And I mean, like, let's take the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Oh God, yeah.
I have a very hard time. I have to read that in small bites.
Me too. I had a hard time reading that book. I loved it, but it is hard to, it's hard to stomach. Yeah.
But I just think that, and that's where you go with, I mean, an editor should also be talking to the author. You know, what is
Hmm.
it you want? What are you looking to get here? And, you know, get to know the author a little bit too, not just the author getting to know the editor.
Right. So if we
So I
have
guess
subjects like that, would it be preferred that when we are emailing, we're saying, hey, I do talk about this subject? Is that something we should be bringing up
I
along with sex?
I would prefer to know that. Um I don't mind the graphic sex.
Hmm.
I don't mind. I've edited some erotica. I've edited sweet romance where there was no sex. Um, so I don't mind that. But yeah, you should tell your editor beforehand.
Hmm.
I think so. I think that would
I
just
think
be
so.
professional courtesy
Yeah.
more than anything else.
I made the mistake with an audiobook of not letting the producer know that there was sex. And he ended up being okay with it, but I learned my lesson, and now I do bring that up. So I think that's another thing you should do with editors too. So, okay, last question. Um, she wants to know, if you were sent a poorly written manuscript, would you turn it away or charge more based on the amount of work?
Oh, this is another one that's
I know, these are these people's burning questions, Terri.
um
And I don't think it's just you, but maybe like it as a whole. Should an editor say your book is not ready for this process?
right. That happens, and you know, there are editors out there who will do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I tend to be such a softie, and I have a huge heart for indie authors. I feel like it's an uphill battle just to begin with.
It is.
And once I've given you a quote, I will never come back and say, you owe me more money because of
Okay.
this. I won't. That's my own personal thing. Um, it, as far as would I charge more, I mean, if it's like horrible, I might, and if it's like, you know, 100,000 words and I know it's going to take me like 2 weeks to get through this or something, I might charge a little bit more, but I mean, we're talking like maybe 25% more at the most. And I might not even do it then because but this is just me. I'm, that's probably my failing as a business person is I do tend to be a little bit soft and
So am I. And you know, I've emailed you before because I do beta reading. And I know I've messaged you like, how do I tell this person this when it's touchy? And I've gotten a beta read before where I just had to say to her, you're not like, I love what you're doing here and I see where you're going, but you are not ready for this part of the process yet. And that was really hard. And I thought I was going to throw up and lose this person as a friend. But in the end, I think sometimes you just have to be honest.
yeah, and I've started actually, you know, if you're making the same mistake over and over and over again, and let's say it is 100,000 words or something, you know, I'll put a little note that says, I'm not going to correct this anymore. After 50 pages, I think you should get it. You can go
Yeah.
back and correct this on your own because then that takes me away from another mistake that I might catch, you know, on page 400 or something.
Yeah.
So I have done that, but I try really hard to to do the best that I can do. And I tell everybody, I tend to be a little bit more traditional in like my grammar rules. I mean, I was the girl who loved to diagram sentences.
Oh gosh.
I loved diagramming sentences. And the more I write, the more I realize that sometimes you have to break those rules for the story. You know, it's okay to end a sentence in a preposition if it's part of the story.
Yeah.
But as an editor, I wear a different hat.
Oh, for sure.
And so and that's why I just tell all my clients, I make suggestions. These are just suggestions. You don't have to take them. I had one person, and I probably won't work with this person. I don't know, but she took none of them.
Ooh.
And so I was like, okay, well, I still got the money. It was fine. Most of my clients, I find they take about probably 60 to 80% of my suggestions. And then the other ones they don't. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's not my name at the bottom of the book. It's yours.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you for being such a good sport and for answering our burning questions about editors.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Find me through you on Facebook, and they can send me a question if they
want. I'm going to link all your stuff at the bottom of my video. So yeah, people will be able to find you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, Amy. Thanks.
Okay, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I know I had a lot of fun talking with Terri, and I hope that it kind of demystified editing for everyone a little bit. I really want to do more of this, so if you have a specialty in the publishing industry, if you're a cover designer or a proofreader, or even a beta reader, I would love to do an interview with you and just talk about the process and all of that. This was really, really fun, so I hope everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to be back next week with a video that I'm really excited about. I actually put it off, but this weekend I was going to do a 24-hour writing challenge, and that didn't end up happening, but I'll be doing it next weekend. I got a bunch of authors to do it with me, so we're going to vlog the whole thing. I think it's going to be really exciting. Everything from like the snacks to the planning to how the 24-hour day looks. I'm kind of nervous because I don't think I've stayed up 24 hours since I was in my 20s, so we'll see how that goes. So until then, please give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and do the little notification bell up top so you know every time I post a video, and I will see you guys next week.